to complete the whole cycle of implementation project. Okay, so we, as we
Yes,
already have, yeah.
before we start, real quick, can you send us a schedule? What are we going to do each day
Yeah,
if you have
so
already planned out?
right, so the actual HR sessions would start from day after tomorrow. So today and tomorrow we'll be completing the life cycle. How does the whole project works? Okay, who will be writing
Okay.
down the specs, the responsibilities of a SAP HR consultant, and how do you take the assistance from technical consultants. Okay, how do the basis consultant would assist you. So you're going to get the cycle, how the life cycle of the project, the SAP HR project. So from day after tomorrow, that would be, I think, Friday, right? Friday onwards, we'll start SAP HR session. That is the first module will start with organizational management. Okay,
Okay.
so generally how it happens is, for every module at least one session requires for to go ahead for theoretical part of the module. So the first session would be theory, and then we'll start working on the practical part of the module.
Okay.
So today we are now for, as we already discussed, we have 5 types of projects. So what are they? These are the different types of projects that a consultant would get an opportunity to work in a real time. Okay, so the first one would be obviously implementation project. A client who wants to go for SAP implementation, can anyone try this? Because we already discussed. Anyone remember how does it start or how does it work? All of you there, right? When we spoke about the types
Yeah.
of projects, implementation.
Yes, yes.
See, implementation project or full life cycle implementation is all one and the same. And generally, any interview, any client interview would expect to speak on this, because when you write down that you have recently worked for some client like Johnson and Johnson, so they would expect you to speak a few lines, not few lines, large, a lot of things about Johnson and Johnson. So see, it's something happens like this. See, when you are getting prepared for an interview, a client information versus responsibilities. That's how the whole interview would be segregated. Because you write down the client name as Johnson Johnson, and you write down the period as 2009 to 2012. From last 3 years, you're working for Johnson Johnson client. Okay, and there, and then you write down the responsibilities what you have done at that client place. So regarding the responsibilities, you can talk to them, you can talk to the interviewer technically, but before you speak about the responsibility, you are responsible to speak on some few lines about the client, because as you are saying that you are working from last 3 years with a similar client, so the interviewer would expect you that you know a lot about your client, right? So it starts with the number of employees working at Johnson and Johnson. Okay, and how many plants they have, what are the manufacturing plants, how many range of products do they manufacture, how many branches they have all over the United States, how many countries operations they have, what kind of payroll system do they run. Okay, so a lot of details they would expect that you have regarding the client Johnson Johnson. And then at the later part, you can speak on your responsibilities, what kind of enhancements you have involved, or what kind of functionalities you have developed with the assistance of technical consultants, what kind of functional configuration you have done. Okay, so which specialization you worked in at the client place. Did you work in time management module or payroll module, or payroll, personal administration, or organizational management? Which module are you specialized in? So you can say a lot of things like this technically, but before this you need to speak on your client information. So the the interviewer would always expect that the guys coming for the interview have work experience in implementation projects rather than other kinds of projects, because implementation project is most challenging and most time consuming and a long time period module, I mean kind of project in any life cycle. Okay, do you all remember ASAP methodology we spoke in the last session? Hello?
Yeah.
Hello, Firoz?
Yeah.
You remember ASAP methodology?
ASAP methodology. Yeah, I do remember something.
Okay, see, whatever you remember, all of you, just keep, responding so that I would extend from there rather than starting from the first point.
Okay.
Yeah, so what is ASAP?
Is it the accelerated SAP?
Okay, okay, accelerated SAP. What? No, I'm not actually asking about abbreviation. What did we discuss and what are the overview? Do you remember?
Is the enterprise resource planning?
See, the point what we discussed is ASAP is organized, or ASAP was developed by SAP Academy in order to follow by all the implementation partners when they are implementing SAP to their clients. Okay, and ASAP has got 5 phases. What are the five phases we discussed? The first phase, project
Is it the
preparation, the project preparation phase, and then blueprinting phase, blueprint analysis, and then you have build or realization phase, and then we discussed about testing phase or final preparation phase, and then we spoke about go live support. Okay, see, I'm just reviewing on that again. That is very important. You remember now?
what is the roadmap?
Yeah. What is this?
Yeah.
ASAP methodology. Project preparation phase or initial phase, one and the same. Next, second phase, business analysis phase or blueprinting phase. The third one, design and build phase or realization phase. Fourth one, cutover and final preparation phase or testing phase. Fifth one, go live and support. So what are these 5 phases now? All the implementation
Okay.
partners, whoever implement SAP to their clients, would follow these 5 phases. Okay, and this was not followed by all the implementation partners earlier, but when the problems arises, neither the implementation partner nor the SAP could able to find out the right root cause of the problem. So that's the reason SAP felt a need of a dedicated methodology should be followed by all the implementation partners, and came up with this solution called ASAP. So all the implementation partners, whoever it is, whether it is IBM or Accenture or Atos Origin or PricewaterhouseCoopers, whoever it is, when they start implementing SAP to their clients, would follow this 5 phases ASAP methodology. Okay, so now the first 3 phases, all of you please remember this is very important, the most important vital points we're discussing now. This is for the first phase of your interview. The interview would be on 2 parts. The first part would be on your client information. How do you talking about ASAP, talking about your blueprinting, talking about design, talking about your testing process, etc. And then the other part of the interview would be on the responsibilities what you have done at the client place. Okay, so you should be prepared well with the client information as well as the responsibilities what you have done, as well as what are the different phases that you got involved, or what are the phases that you have at your client place. When you have to explain this, you need to have good information about your ASAP methodology happened at your client place, that is your Johnson & Johnson, for example, if you're talking about now. Is that clear? Yes, all of you?
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. So in this 5 phases of ASAP methodology, the first 3 phases would be undergoing in the development client. The fourth phase is nothing but testing phase, and this would undergo in the testing server. And the last phase, go live and support, is nothing but, as the name itself explains, go live and support. So this would undergo in the production system. What is production system? Actual live system. That means your client itself.
It's end user.
Yeah, whether it is end user or whatever it is, your live system means in our scenario now, Johnson & Johnson production system. That means you are into the live. Is that clear? So development client, quality server or testing server, and production system. So these 3 different systems that you have, that you will be facing in the real-time project. So where do you work here?
In the first 3 projects, first 3 part.
First 3 parts. So what are first 3 parts now?
Project preparation, business analysis, and design and build.
Very good. So what is project preparation?
Where client gives us a project, and where we start discussing with our technical consultant and start making the required preparation. I mean, we started preparing for the required project.
See, it does not happen here, Sunny. See, I'll explain you. All of you, please try to remember, okay, and also go through this recording after the session, so that you'll know, you'll have a clear understanding about the whole project. See, first of all, Johnson & Johnson is the client who wants to go for SAP implementation. What is the first thing that Johnson & Johnson client would do when they want to go for SAP implementation, Sunny? Generally, I'm talking about on general view. They
Will
would
hire a consultant from IBM or Accenture.
They would hire consultant from IBM. That means IBM. You mean IBM will not be responsible for implementation? They are not
No,
hiring.
they will.
They are not hiring at all. See, when they want to hire, there are 2 ways of implementation again. For example, the live example, Ford itself. Ford hasn't approached any implementation partner company. That means it did not go to IBM, it did not go to Accenture, it did not go to Infosys.
They straight went to SAP.
They directly purchased SAP license,
Really?
and they directly hired SAP consultants.
Okay, I see.
So SAP consultants are working on their permanent payrolls and started working they started implementing to Ford directly. So there is no mediator, there is no implementation partner. But you will not see this kind of scenario in most of the cases, because most of the clients would be scared if something technically goes wrong, who will be responsible? So that's the reason they would always be taking the support or taking the assistance of an implementation partners who are professional in this area. Okay, so let's talk about the other scenario. The first scenario would be very few. Very few. You would find Colgate and Palmolive, they hire directly the consultants SAP consultants. You have Ford, they directly hired SAP consultants. But the other cases like Motorola or Walmart or Pepsi or Coca-Cola, all these companies have approached different implementation partners for their implementation process. Okay, is that clear till now, every one of you?
Yes, yes, yes.
Yeah.
So now we are talking about see the first step. So now the Johnson & Johnson client wants to go for SAP implementation. What is the first step that they would do? Yes, Firoz?
Yeah, they will buy SAP software from.
See, before they buy, we are talking at a general level, because they don't know the advantages of SAP, because they don't know the budget, how much it come up, and they are not prepared for that. So the first thing what they do is they would approach any of the implementation partners in the market. That means they would approach IBM, they would approach Accenture, they would approach Infosys. When they approach them, every one of them would explain advantages of SAP and how much the budget would come up. Then after having this initial meeting, they would have an understanding about the budget, the number of people that they need to hire or they need to approach, and the number of users that they need, etc. So they have a clear understanding after they having meetings. Now what they would do is they would invite all these implementation partners for the bidding activity. What is bidding activity, Prayag? Yes, Sunny?
They bid on the project, like who can maybe do it
Right, bidding or pre-sales.
Cheaper.
Pre-sales activity. That means everyone will give their quotation. IBM would give some $100 million to complete this SAP implementation to Johnson & Johnson. Okay, so this one may give $80 million. So it would vary from client, from company, from implementation partner company to implementation partner company. So generally the least quoted will win the project. Let's assume that IBM is the least quoted one and IBM won the project. So that's the first initial things happens. Now when IBM has won the project, what are the things, what are the details that Johnson & Johnson client have it now? Johnson & Johnson client has good information about the whole budget that would come up, okay, and the number of users, and the number of users that they will be, number of users in the sense the Johnson & Johnson client employees I'm talking about. The number of Johnson & Johnson client employees will be working on the SAP system, who will be accessing the SAP system, who will be maintaining the details. So they have a clear understanding about the whole process now. And now IBM is going to implement SAP to the client Johnson & Johnson.
Okay. So the Johnson & Johnson employees, such as a HR manager, will be using SAP as their one of the software, right?
Yeah, they're all users now.
Okay.
After implementation, they will be the users. So beforehand itself, before implementation happens itself, the client Johnson & Johnson should have a clear understanding about the number of users, because based on the number of users that will be accessing SAP system, the SAP license cost would vary.
Oh, I see, I see.
Okay, see, it is not the same for Johnson & Johnson client as well as the middle level company. The license cost would not be the same. It varies from the number of users that they will be accessing after implementation.
Okay. So suppose there are 10 modules. There are 10 modules in SAP, HR, SD, and all that. So, and there are only 10 people who's going to be using that.
No, not 10. 10 is
SAP.
not sufficient, right? For example, in HR department itself, there will be a training manager, training HR manager. There will be payroll HR manager. There will be time management HR manager. There will be recruiting HR manager. Like this, you'll have a huge departments.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Because there will be one person, one manager for hiring process to complete. There will be one manager to take up the whole training part of that newly hired employee. There will be one person who will be taking only the payroll process about that employee. There will be one person who will be scheduling the work schedules and pay and escalating it to the information to the HR payroll process. So there will be again sub departments in HR process again.
So all of them
Yes.
has to use the SAP.
Yes, obviously there will be a lot of users, end users in HR department itself. Like this, in every department you'll have a lot of end users. So they should have a good understanding about the number of users they will be accessing SAP system after implementation done. Based on that, they can give that figure, that statistics to SAP when they are about to purchase the SAP license.
Okay.
So before these 5 phases starts, the client Johnson & Johnson should have a lot of understanding about what is going on, what will be going on in the near future for the whole implementation process. Is that clear to all of you?
Yes.
Now, before this 5 phases starts, Johnson & Johnson client has a good understanding about the whole budget that will come up and the number of users that will be accessed by in SAP system. And also now who is the implementation partner. So all these details are pretty clear for Johnson & Johnson client. Now, now in this scenario, IBM will be called as implementation partner. Now Johnson & Johnson client should purchase SAP license from SAP directly, and they have to give it to the implementation partner IBM.
Is the
Now,
IBM also partner for Oracle or some other software, or just only for SAP?
why did Oracle come up here?
I'm just asking.
Maybe, see, we are not concerned about Oracle. See, I'm talking about implementation partner is nothing but SAP is pioneer in developing SAP software, and they themselves cannot implement to all the clients all across the world. So they have chosen and some authorized implementation partners, that they have an agreement with some authorized implementation partners. That means that means as the client will purchase SAP license from SAP, and the implementation is done by some authorized implementation partners. IBM, Accenture, these are
This can be IBM.
yes, these can.
Sorry.
There are a lot of authorized implementation partners, and one of them is IBM, Accenture, Atos, Origin, PricewaterhouseCoopers. So some companies have good command on some areas. For example, if you talk about Middle East, maybe you heard about the big companies, the oil and gas industry companies in Middle East, Saudi Arabia, Dubai. So their SAP implementation were done, but most of the SAP implementation is done by an implementation partner called Atos Origin. It's a big company. So in United States, you find most of them are done by either IBM or Accenture. So like that, they have some good command in certain areas. Okay. In India, if you talk about, most of the implementation is done by either Infosys or HCL, some Indian companies, right? So like that, they have good command in certain areas. So these are all authorized implementation partners. So a client can always go to any of these implementation partners when they want to go for SAP implementation. Okay, is that clear now?
Yes, clear.
Now in this context, now IBM is the implementation partner, and Johnson & Johnson has to purchase SAP license, and they have to give it to IBM. Now IBM has good understanding about the number of modules that they need to implement. That's the first key point. See, the license of the SAP license would come up as a whole package, but the client Johnson & Johnson is not interested to implement HR. Let's assume that, or is not implemented in implementing FICO for some reason. Then, according to their interest, the IBM has to hire the consultants who are required in the project. And now tell me, what could be the reason a client like Johnson & Johnson would avoid a HR module implementation or FICO module implementation? Can you anyone guess or give me some assumptions?
Another reason could be they're using a different software. Another reason because they don't have that big of a HR department, so they don't need to use it. It will be more hassle to
That's
use
that's
it.
that's true. So let's assume that before Johnson and Johnson client purchased SAP license, it's already running on PeopleSoft HR only for HR department. Let's assume that. So now running with PeopleSoft HR, they are pretty comfortable. Who are pretty comfortable here, Sunny? The end users.
Johnson and Johnson.
The
Okay.
Johnson Johnson employees are very comfortable. When they are very comfortable with that software, the owner of the Johnson Johnson does not want to disturb the HR department by implementing SAP HR now. So what he can ask is what what he can ask is can ask all the implementation can happen to all the modules. Okay, the implementation can happen to all the modules except HR, and after implementation is done, the integration between PeopleSoft HR and all other SAP module has to be done without failure. Okay, then only we can call it as the whole system got automated. Is that clear now?
Yes.
So a client like Johnson & Johnson have always a chance, have always an opportunity to ask for how many modules do they want to go for its implementation and how many modules do they don't want to. Based on this statistics, the IBM will be paid by Johnson & Johnson.
I have one question. So the Johnson and Johnson still have to pay the same amount. Is that if they want to
Yes.
implement
Yes.
the whole SAP or not?
Yes, because it comes in the package. This 10 modules comes in the package.
Yeah, based
Yes.
on the number of users, the SAP license cost would vary, and the client should pay irrespective of the number of modules that they are going to use. They have to pay the whole amount. Okay, Rahman?
Yeah, that's right.
Because SAP is not releasing independent modules at all. They are selling out integrated license, integrated software. By the time you're purchasing SAP license, you're getting an integrated suite. And that integrated suite contains integrated modules. There is an integration between FICO department, HR department, sales department, production department, warehouse department, and quality management department. So there is an integration already done by SAP itself before they sold out the license to you. Okay. Now IBM, when IBM won the project, IBM has a good understanding about the number of users that they are going to access at Johnson & Johnson client. They also have the IBM also have a clear understanding about the number of modules that they are going to implement at the Johnson & Johnson client. If Johnson & Johnson client have given a clear idea that they are going for implementation of all the modules, then IBM has to hire all the consultants required for implementation process. So IBM starts hiring HR consultants, HR functional, HR technical, SD functional, SD technical, MM functional, MM technical, like this, along with basis consultants, along with ABAPers, everything they need to hire. Okay, so after the hiring process is done, the IBM senior most consultant, that is SAP HR functional consultants. Okay, SAP HR functional consultant senior team, that is well experienced senior leads, along with SD functional senior leads, along with MM functional senior leads, along with FICO functional senior leads. So I'm talking about functional consultants prior. All the senior functional consultants from IBM will go to the client place at Johnson & Johnson. They go there, they stay there, they try to understand the manual business processes going on at Johnson & Johnson. When they have talked to all the employees there, and when they have talked to the project lead as well as the business process owner, they would get a clear understanding what is the manual business process going on at Johnson & Johnson now. The senior HR functional consultant should take care of the HR business process going on manually there. Okay.
Okay.
So when they gather all the requirements, when they try to analyze what's going on manually, when they interact with all the business process owner and other employees in the department, and all these details will be documented, and we call it as a manual blueprint. It's just a manual blueprint, and this manual blueprint contains all the actions going on at the client place regarding that HR department alone. Okay, so every senior functional consultant does the same. FICO team, HR team, sales team, production team, everyone has gathered the requirement and they're documented as a manual blueprint, and this huge manual blueprints will come back to IBM now. Okay, now what they do is, now on one side they have SAP license purchased by client Johnson & Johnson. On the other hand, they have the client requirements gathered from the client place. So on one side they have SAP license, on the other hand they have requirement now. So the next step would be, they would like to map the requirements gathered from the client place with the existing SAP license standard system. So what is this SAP license system now, Prayag? This is a licensed standard system. That means it can be utilized by themselves, but the requirement asked by the client Johnson & Johnson may not be satisfied in that standard system. That's the reason you need to map your requirements gathered from the client place with the existing SAP license system. When you map, a few of them are compatible, a few requirements are compatible, a few requirements are not compatible. Am I clear to you, Rahman?
Yeah, that's it.
Do you understand the compatibility and non-compatibility, right?
Yeah.
That means when you gather the requirement from client place, you can directly implement that requirement in the SAP system, and you don't need to customize, or you don't need to make any changes. But there are few requirements which are not compatible as it is. That means the requirement gathered are not compatible on the SAP standard system as it is. So you need to make some changes in your SAP license system in order to make the requirement satisfied in the system. So for that reason, you need to map the requirements. Okay, when you are mapping the requirements with SAP standard system, you get a lot of compatibilities and non-compatibilities.
Okay.
So there is no problem with the compatibilities, but we need to be worrying about non-compatibilities. You need to sort out all the requirements that are not compatible with the existing license system. Okay, and you need to start analyzing the non-compatibilities, why they are not compatibility with the existing license system. And you're going to, and these non-compatibilities, generally we call them in real time as gaps. Please remember this terminology, gaps. Gaps are nothing but the differences between the client asked requirement and SAP license system. Is that clear? Now you need to analyze these gaps.
Please?
Gaps is nothing but the differences between the client asked requirement and SAP license system. So the client is asking something else which is not really compatible in SAP license system. Okay, so that is a gap. That is a difference. And these gaps have to be analyzed by the functional consultants. For example, the gaps regarding HR module or HR department, the gaps regarding HR department have to be analyzed by the HR functional consultants. Is that clear?
Yes. These are the requirements these are the requirements given by the Johnson & Johnson, or this is just the information that was gathered and we were trying to map the information that we just gathered?
A lot of information have to be given by Johnson Johnson because we are just beginners. We don't know anything about Johnson Johnson. Obviously, they have to support them by giving a lot of documents.
Okay. No, as you mentioned before that we have to personally go over there and see
Yes,
how.
see, before you go there, a lot of documents will be sent to you and you can read them. But still, you cannot completely understand the process until unless you see by by manually going there. So you will observe how the whole process is going on.
Okay.
And then you will get a good understanding about how the HR department is running on, how many employees are working, how many plants they have, because that's also key point. Because at every plant, how many employees are working again, that is also a ratio proportion they need to consider. And how many payroll systems are they running? Are they running weekly payroll or bi-monthly payroll or bi-weekly payroll or monthly payroll? How many permanent employees are working? How many contract employees are working? And how the difference of the rates? What is the appraisal system are they following? So a lot of details that need to be gathered before they build on any system.
So we have to map the detail that we gather as well as the requirement that is given by the Johnson & Johnson, right?
Right, mapping the requirements with the standard license system. See, the day you purchased SAP license is
Yeah.
standard license system. So in the standard license system, a lot of requirements already have been developed, but it may or may not be
Yeah.
compatible to your requirement. So as a consultant, initially that's your job to find out what are satisfied, what are not satisfied with these requirements.
Okay.
You need to find out, you need to sort out what are the non-compatibilities, and all these non-compatibilities have to be documented, and the HR functional consultant should analyze why these HR non-compatibilities are there. After analyzing, we generally call it as gaps. These gaps have to be analyzed by the functional consultants regarding HR module, and after analyzing, they have to provide the gap solutions. So what is a gap solution? Gap solution is nothing but what changes need to be done in SAP HR module
Yeah, to fulfill the requirements.
to fulfill the requirement asked by the client, Johnson & Johnson.
Yes.
You're not immediately doing it in the SAP HR system, but you are doing the paperwork now.
Okay.
You don't need to. Yes, you're putting everything on the paper. You're not doing it immediately.
Okay.
You're just putting on the paper what kind of solution need to be done in SAP HR system in order to fulfill the requirement asked by the client Johnson & Johnson.
Okay.
Okay, and after having everything on the paper, these documents have to be approved by the business process owner at Johnson & Johnson. We cannot just take the decision by ourselves. We need to explain everything what we are planning to do in order to satisfy the requirements asked by the Johnson & Johnson, what changes we are planning to do in SAP system, and we need to get approval from the business process owner at Johnson & Johnson.
Those business process owners should have a knowledge of SAP, since we are
obviously the business process owner does not mean the CEO of Johnson & Johnson. Generally what happens is Johnson & Johnson, when they want to go for SAP implementation, they'll hire an expert who really knows everything about their company and who can really explain what they need.
Okay, I see.
So that he will be representing the Johnson & Johnson for any kind of requirement. Yes, he will be representing the Johnson & Johnson for any kind of requirement. So we are going to approach that guy who represents Johnson Johnson for any kind of technicalities or for any kind of requirement to be asked.
Okay.
So once the documents are sent for approval by business process owner at Johnson Johnson, if he approves it, we are going to go forward and start working on SAP HR system practically now. Otherwise, we have to redo the whole design about it. Is that clear?
Yes. While we are designing, do we take
No, my definition of design means you already analyzed the gaps. You gave the gap solutions, and that gap solutions are not liked, or the gap solution is not they did not felt interested about that gap solution. They asked you to give an alternative solution for these gaps. So then you're going to redo it again, giving an alternative solution to the business process owner.
While we are giving a solution for a gap, is
Yes,
that going to be
you will take the assistance of SAP HR technical people also.
okay?
But they are also they are also not doing it practically. They are also giving the assumptions.
Yes.
They are also doing the paperwork, and you are also doing the paperwork. And once the documents are approved, then you will start practically doing on SAP HR system.
Okay.
So now let's assume that the documents were approved by the business process owner at Johnson & Johnson. Now you can start working on SAP HR system hereafter. But before you do that, once it is approved, you'll get as a bulk documents. That means you'll have that huge document called as the whole blueprint.
Okay.
That blueprint contains the gap solutions regarding HR module, MM module, SD module, FI module, PP module. Every module gap solutions are getting approved at a bulk level. Okay, you got it now. Now it's your job as a SAP HR functional team. It's your job to segregate or to divide your SAP HR blueprint from that huge document.
Oh, I see.
So now you have in your hand SAP HR blueprint. Now with this help of SAP HR blueprint, you are going to write down the specifications, because this SAP HR blueprint contains the necessary changes that you need to do in SAP HR system in order to fulfill the requirement asked by the client. So you cannot simply, one single person cannot do all the necessary changes that are planned to do, right? So after you have your SAP HR blueprint, you're going to write down the specifications, both technically and functionally. The functional specifications as well as technical specifications are written by the functional consultant itself. Specifications are nothing but the guideline that need to be sent to the relevant person so that they can start working on SAP HR system practically now. So the technical specifications are sent to the technical consultant, that is SAP HR developers. The functional specifications are sent to the functional consultant, that is SAP HR functional consultants. So the technical specifications, after received by the technical consultant, they start working on the technical. The functional consultants, after they receive the functional specification, they start configuring functionally. Okay, the functionally configured objects are called as business objects, also called as functional objects. We always call them as objects. Sunny, we always call them as objects.
Okay.
So in the similar way, the technically customized objects are called as technical objects. So you have on one side functional objects, on the other hand you have technical objects. Technical objects, as a bunch of technical objects, are stored in a different package, and a bunch of functional objects are stored in a different package, and these packages are transported to the quality server for quality analysis. And who will transport this? The transportation job is done by absolutely basis consultants only in real time. Basis consultants, as we discussed earlier, they are the people who will be responsible for user management, authorization management, transportation of objects, installation activities, etc. Okay, so where are we all till now? Where did we work till now? We worked in a phase called development client, Rahman. The whole client process can be segregated into development client, quality server, production server. Can you all see that I highlighted?
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. So development client is the one where all the requirements are gathered. The requirements are mapped with the standard license system, finding out the gaps, sorting out the incompatibilities, analyzing the gaps, finding out the gap solutions, documenting the gap solutions, sending the gap solutions to the business process owner for approval. After getting approval, the blueprint of HR module is segregated, and after HR module blueprint is available, now technical specifications and function specifications are written by the function consultants, and they are sent out to the technical consultants and functional consultants simultaneously. Now till here everything would undergo in the development client only. Whatever we just spoke till now, everything will undergo in the development client. As an SAP HR functional consultant, you also work in the development client in your system landscape. Okay, and once the technical customization and functional configuration is done, functionally configured objects are called as functional objects, technically customized objects are technical objects. These functional objects are stored in a different package, and technical objects are stored in a different package, and these packages are transported to the quality server by the basis consultants. At the quality server, you have a testing team who are responsible for to find out the test objects, to find out the issues, okay, to find out the bugs. And this testing team most of the time will work on the manual testing only. Though automated testing are available in the market, SAP suggests to go for manual testing. So in the testing server, you have testing team who will take care of the test analysis of all the objects sent to the testing process. And once you find error-free information in the testing process, all these objects are again transported from testing server to the production system. And what is production system? Production system is nothing but the live system where where the end users start using a SAP system for their own business activities. Again, the transportation of these objects, again the transportation of these tested objects from testing server to the production system is done by the basis consultants again. So transportation of objects from development client to quality server as well as from quality server to production system is done by basis consultant team. So this whole cycle of transportation of objects from whole in the system landscape is called as transportation management system, TMS. And once the objects are transported to the production system, now the end users cannot start immediately using SAP system for their own business processes. They need to get trained. That is called end user training. So at the production system, the end users need to be getting trained by the functional consultants. Regarding HR end users, the HR functional team is responsible to give the the end user training. And this end user training would last for 15 days to 30 days at most. And in the period course of time, they would be provided with some end user training material, some navigations, the transaction code that they need to remember every day for their own activities. Once the end user training is done, then
Who's gonna give that training again? A functional consultant?
Yes, the functional team itself need to go to client place at Johnson & Johnson. They are going to stay there at least 15 days to 30 days, and they are going to give the training. They are providing training material. They are providing the navigations. They are providing the list of transaction codes that they need to remember and everything.
Okay.
And once the end user training is done, the end users can start using SAP system for their own business processes. And once they start using it, they give an approval of user acceptance testing, UAT. Once it is given, once it is approved, then our job is done as a part of implementation process.
Okay. Once the job is done and if the end user has a problem or question, they can still ask us, or they have to go through again IBM.
Generally what happens is, if Johnson and Johnson client planned to give SAP implementation process to IBM, then IBM will write an agreement initially with Johnson and Johnson. After implementation is done, at least they'll give 1 year free support.
Okay.
Generally that happens in the market, but it depends. Certain implementation partners will not be interested in that. Once the implementation is done, their job is done. If the end users need the support of the consultants, then they have to write an agreement called end service level agreement, SLA, where it would last for an year. And in the service level agreement, for every ticket or for every problem, there will be some charges by IBM, and these charges would vary based on the kind of ticket that they are sending it out. There are different priorities of the tickets that will be issued. The priorities of tickets would vary, like critical priority ticket, high level priority ticket, middle level priority, and low level priority. And based on the priority of the tickets, the IBM charges would vary. And before the IBM consultant would help supporting the end users, they need to write an agreement called service level agreement. And these priorities depends on the number of hours of time frame that they need to close the issue. The critical level priority ticket has to be solved within an hour, because the whole business process is on hold at the Johnson & Johnson. So they cannot afford to take more than an hour. High level priority ticket can be taken some time. Middle level priority, you can take it a day or two. Low level priority, you can take it for a week or so. So based on the priorities of the tickets in the service level agreement, each and every ticket will be charged. Am I all clear to you?
Yeah.
So this is whole cycle that will go on, starting from requirement gathering to the go live and support. So the whole cycle is segregated into 5 phases. That is initial project preparation phase, business analysis phase, design and build phase, testing phase, and go live and support. All these 5 phases is together called as ASAP methodology. Out of these 5 phases, the first 3 phases would undergo in the development client. The first 3 phases is the actual job of the functional consultants, whether it is HR functional or SD functional or FICO functional. The 4th phase would undergo in the quality server. The 5th phase would undergo in the production system. And these 3, development client, quality server, and production server, these 3 together called a system landscape. And the first question you may get is, who will set up this system landscape? Prayag, who will set up this system landscape? The system landscape has to be set up by the basis consultants in real time before the actual project starts. As soon as IBM won the project, IBM basis consultant should set up the system landscape before the functional and technical consultants start working in the project. Am I clear to you?
Yes.
So basis consultants are responsible for user management. They are responsible for authorizations. They are responsible for installation of SAP software at the client place. They are responsible for transportation of objects from one system landscape to other system landscape. They are also responsible for setup of the system landscape before the actual project starts. Any questions for till now? Okay, what you will do is today go through the today's recording file as well as yesterday's recording file also. Tomorrow we'll wind up the whole project life cycle again, and from day after tomorrow we'll start HR process. Okay, is that clear?
Day after tomorrow, we're gonna go. You'll actually use the software.
Yes, that is SAP HR system. See, this is all required whether you are learning HR or FICO or MM, whichever be the module you are learning in SAP. This is all the stuff you require to have a good understanding about what you are learning, what is end user process, what is consultant job, what is end user access. Because a lot of people get confused between the difference between end user's job and the consultant job.
Okay. So.
Sometimes you learn HR, you learn end user job and you assume that you know everything about consultant job, but that is not true, because you need to have this clear understanding only when you have an idea how the whole cycle works. Hello Firoz.
Yeah.
Yeah, any questions Firoz?
The question, I was trying to install that GUI yesterday.
Okay, should I do it now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Does everyone have this software called TeamViewer?
TeamViewer.
Yes,
No.
we can download that in a few seconds. It won't take us more than 2 seconds to download it.
Yeah, download it. I can directly work on your local machine. I can access your system.